You open ChatGPT, ask it for the best tool in your category the way a buyer would, and it hands back the same competitor it always does. Maybe you've started showing up in a few places, and it still puts them first. Or maybe it doesn't bring you up at all. We covered how to get yourself into that answer in another video, so today I want to dig into the question sitting right underneath it, which is why that one company keeps getting picked. What does your competitor have that you don't? The thing that makes the engine keep reaching for their name. There's a real, traceable reason behind it, and once you can see it, you'll know where to push. So let me walk you through how to reverse engineer your competitor, one engine at a time. This matters more than it did a year ago because so many buyers now open an AI and ask who they should use, and they trust the short answer it gives back. If you run marketing in-house, that's your brand getting passed over in the exact moment someone was ready to choose. And if you run an agency, it's a client on the phone asking why their rival keeps coming up when they never do. The reassuring part is that the answer is rarely random, and it's almost never about who has the bigger team or the prettier website. It comes down to where each brand lives in the handful of places these engines read. So before you can close the gap, you have to see what your competitor is standing on that you're not. Start with the one idea that explains most of what follows. A brand can land in an AI answer two different ways, and they don't carry the same weight. The first is getting named from memory, where the model picked up your name while it was trained and repeats it from there. The second is getting pulled from a live source, where the engine searches the web as it answers, finds a page it trusts, and quotes that page to back up what it says. Your competitor is usually getting that second kind, the sourced kind, because there's a fresh page out there the engine can point at. In our research, around 85% of the time a brand comes up in these answers, it's riding in on someone else's page, not its own website. So the competitor's edge is that the engine has a page it can point to for them, and nothing to point to for you. Think of it like a hiring call the engine is making on the spot. Getting named from memory is the candidate whose name someone half remembers from a while back. Getting pulled from a live source is the candidate who walks in with a fresh reference the manager already trusts. When the engine has to pick who to recommend, the one holding the live reference wins almost every time. Your competitor shows up with that reference in hand, and you show up on a half-remembered name. And that source is harder to earn than it looks, because these engines don't read the whole internet when they answer you. They lean on a narrow shelf of places they already trust, mostly Wikipedia, Reddit, and a handful of big mainstream sites. In one of our studies, the top 15 sites accounted for about 68% of everything the major engines pulled from, which leaves everyone else splitting what's left. Your competitor has a spot on that shelf and you don't, so the model reaches for them first, without weighing the two products against each other. All it's doing is repeating the names it found in the sources it leans on. So the whole job is getting onto that shelf, because while you're off it, the work you pour into your own site barely reaches the answer. One of the most common ways a competitor gets onto that shelf is almost cheeky once you spot it. They publish a page titled something like, "The Best Alternatives to Your Brand," a comparison page that names you on purpose. So when a buyer asks the engine for options in your category, it pulls that page in, and the recommendation flows to the competitor who wrote it. Your own brand name ends up doing the work of getting them quoted, and you never see it happen. It also compounds, because the brand that's already established tends to keep its lead. In one study we ran, when people asked for alternatives to a brand, the original brand still came back in the top spot about 93% of the time. The incumbent wins the very searches that were meant to replace it. None of this means you're stuck behind them for good. We track startups that have broken into these answers next to much bigger names, so it does happen. When we looked closely, the ones that made it had built a real surface for the engines to find, an open set of docs, an active presence in the communities, and a long trail of people talking about them. It wasn't quick, and out of 4 newcomers we followed, only one had pulled it off across every engine. So the door is open. It opens for the brand that builds the most for the engine to trust. Which brings us back to the practical question. What is your competitor giving it that you aren't? There's a quieter version of this that stings a bit more, where you do get mentioned and still lose. The engine drops your name into the answer from memory, so it looks like you're in the conversation, but it never backs you with a source. Your competitor, sitting on a real page, gets the recommendation and the trust that comes with it. So a quick glance makes it feel like you're showing up, when you're a footnote and they're the answer. That's why seeing your name once isn't the finish line. What you're after is being the brand the engine can stand behind with a source. You might be thinking, you already have a page for this, so why does theirs get pulled while yours sits there ignored? A few things separate a source the engine reaches for from one it skips. The first is whose voice it's in, since the model treats an outside roundup or a Reddit thread as a verdict, and treats your own site as a sales pitch it trusts less. Across the engines, ChatGPT points back to a brand's own website about a quarter of the time, and Gemini leans on it even less. The second is shape, because a page that answers the exact question in its first couple of lines is easy to quote, and content like that is around 4 times more likely to get pulled in. The third is age, since these engines favor fresh material and discount anything that's been sitting untouched for a year. So when your competitor's source beats yours, it's winning on one of those, and each one is something you can change. The next thing to know is that your competitor might be winning each engine for a different reason, so one check on one engine won't give you the full picture. Take ChatGPT. It only runs a live web search on about a third of the questions people ask it, and the rest it answers from memory, leaning hard on Wikipedia. So a competitor with a strong Wikipedia presence has a quiet hold there you'd never notice from the outside. Grok plays by different rules, pulling from Reddit on roughly a third of its answers, so the brand that owns the right threads tends to win it. Perplexity lays its sources out in the open as numbered links, which makes it the easiest place to catch who's getting pulled in. And Claude barely shifts its picks from week to week, so whoever it already trusts stays parked at the top. So the same competitor can beat you on Wikipedia in one engine and on Reddit in another, which is why you diagnose them engine by engine. Keeping that per engine picture current by hand is real work, since the answers move under you every week. It's the core of what a tool like Loudmink does, watching ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, and Grok, and showing which competitor each one names and which sources it pulled to get there. You can map it yourself with nothing but the engines, which is what I'll walk through next. The point either way is to turn that vague sense that your competitor is everywhere into a plain list of where and why. So let's diagnose it, for free, using nothing but the engines themselves. Pick the real question a buyer would type, something like, the best project management tool for a small remote team, and ask it in each engine, one at a time. Then ask the engine to show its work, since in Perplexity, the sources sit right there as numbered links, and in ChatGPT, you can ask which sources it used. Read what's carrying your competitor in each answer, whether that's a best of roundup, a Reddit thread, a review site, or their own comparison page. Write it down engine by engine, the exact source giving them the edge, and the place where your name should be and isn't. That list is your gap, sitting in plain sight, and it looks different for every competitor and every engine. Let me make that concrete. Say you sell that project management tool, and you ask ChatGPT for the best option for a small remote team. It names 2 competitors, and when you ask for its sources, it points to one best of article and a Reddit thread. You run the same question through Grok, and this time a different rival wins, writing a couple of older Reddit posts that are still getting quoted today. Already you've learned something useful, that one competitor owns the roundup and another owns the community, and they're beating you in different rooms. Now you're not staring at a wall, you've got 2 specific pages to go after. You can keep all of this in a simple spreadsheet, and it works well. Loudmink runs the same play for you, putting your questions through every engine and showing which competitor each one names and which sources it leaned on, so you skip the manual logging. Either route gets you to the same place, a clear view of the exact sources doing the work. And once you can name those sources, the whole thing stops feeling mysterious. You're not guessing why they win anymore, because you can see the pages doing it for them. One more habit makes this stick, and it's worth the few minutes. After you've made a move, getting into a roundup or adding a real answer in a thread, wait a couple of weeks and run the same questions again. You're watching for 2 things, whether your name starts appearing and whether the source behind the answer starts changing hands toward you. The source shifting is the early signal, because the name tends to follow the source by a cycle or 2. So treat it as a loop you run every month or so, since the answers keep moving as the web underneath them changes. Fixing the gap is its own job, and I won't replay the whole playbook here. I walked through the full step-by-step in the video on how to show up in ChatGPT, so start there for the detailed how. The short version is that you go close the specific gaps you found, getting into the roundup that keeps naming them, adding a real reply in the Reddit thread the engine quotes, and keeping all of it current. The one move worth calling out for this problem is the comparison page. If a competitor is winning through a best alternatives to you page, you write your own honest comparison, include them fairly, and put yourself back in the running. That way, when the engine reaches for a comparison, there's a version of the story that finally has you in it. 2 traps to dodge while you do this, both easy to fall into when you're chasing one competitor. The first is copying their page word for word, which hands the engine a weaker duplicate of something it already trusts, so make yours more useful instead of a clone. The second is tunneling on the one engine where you're losing and forgetting the rest, when your buyers are spread across all of them. Fix the engine that matters most for your audience first, then carry the same moves to the others. Putting in real, useful work beats trying to shortcut it, the same as everywhere else in this game. So when ChatGPT keeps recommending your competitor, the reason is usually ordinary. They're sitting in a source the engine trusts, often a page that names you, and you're missing from the answer because there's nothing there for it to pull. Find where they're strong, engine by engine, close that one gap, and you change what the answer says about you. And if you'd rather not run the whole diagnosis by hand, head to loudmink.ai and run the free scan. It'll show you which competitor is winning each engine and the sources giving them the edge, and the agents can draft the fixes for you to approve. Give it a real month, and you'll watch the answers start to include you.